Now, enough said with KFAN Radio's Dan Barrero and attorney and HoldingCourtPodcast.com's Ron Rosenbaum.
This person is responsible for what occurs in Gopher Athletics. He's responsible for setting the right tone at the top in terms of how people treat each other in all dimensions, the right tone at the top for the balance between athletic success and academic success, and the tone at the top for how we are perceived in Minnesota and around the country.
Welcome back to another edition of Enough Said. My name's Dan Barrero, and I'm joined today by Justin Gard, producer on the Bumper to Bumper Show, filling in for Mr. Rosenbaum. Welcome, sir, to the show. And we got Lori Fisher in the box. Lori, where do we want to begin?
Hi, guys. You just heard from U of M President Eric Kaler announcing a 16-member search committee for the new athletic director. He also named a search firm. The school has been without a permanent AD since last August. You tweeting, the fan has learned that the Zootopia sloth has just been added to Gophers AD search committee. Too slow of a process, Dan?
Oh, no, not at all. One of my disappointments, Guardsy, is that the new Archbishop, Hebda, was not on the committee, and Tony Dungy was not on the committee, although they probably tried. Look, we've all done our jokes on this, and we're not the first university to have committees, right? But every time the U does this, they move one step closer, I think, to turning themselves into a laughingstock because of the perception. Why 32? Why not, I don't know, 64 like the NCAA tournament? Where exactly does it end? And it gives credence, I think, to the notion that people in charge are afraid to stick their own butts on the line and make leadership decisions that allegedly we pay them to do, that they want this cover, and every constituency has to be somehow part of this process.
We lead the world, right, if not the universe, in layers, in bureaucracy, but I actually think this is kind of progress a little bit, because when they hired Norwood Teague, wasn't it 32 or 35 on the first committee? I think it was bigger. I think they
that was the subcommittee.
Well, they had a subcommittee as well. There were multiple committees, bigger than this one. There was also a search firm. I think this is progress. We've narrowed it down to 16, even though the goal was going to be 8 to 10.
Maybe you're right. How about this idea? How about just making a phone call to Barry Alvarez off the record and say, Barry, you're plugged in, or you can tell me who is plugged in. Give me 5 names that we should be looking at the beginning of this process. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Barry would want to mess with us because we're in the same conference. I think he would. But in all honesty, I have no faith, zero faith, that at the end of this process we're going to be any better off than we were if we had a smaller group and we had people in charge saying, this is what they pay me to do. I think we'll agree on the hiring of another search firm. That's more legit.
Yep.
As long as, to me, it's not in charge. It's more of the vetting process of getting a hold of someone who has a job right now so that you can say, well, we didn't contact that person directly with a job.
And that's why I hope this committee is actually more than just the ceremonial committee that the last one was. From people that I talked to that were on one of those 8 committees that did it last time, it wasn't an engaging thing. It was more of a ceremonial thing where it's just, here are the names, and they really didn't have any input. As we saw, the search firm basically just said, here's Norwood Teague, this is your guy.
Can they find a room big enough for all the entire group to be in at the same time? That's the other question I have.
Not until the facilities project is done.
Okay.
Then there's going to be a nice big room.
On that note, we're going to move on. As if the election wasn't already nasty enough, now some of the candidates' wives have been brought into the mix. A Twitter war between Republicans Donald Trump and Ted Cruz after a super PAC tweeted out a naked modeling picture of Melania Trump, Trump's wife. And then Trump fired back. Take a look at this tweet with a tweet threatening to spill the beans about Cruz's wife, Heidi, with a side-by-side picture shot of the wives. And then Cruz saying, real men don't attack women. Your wife is lovely, and Heidi is the love of my life. Dan, is this fair game?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, we've been so worn down. What's the distinction?
No difference.
I wasn't exactly overjoyed with what the president had to say in Cuba regarding what happened in Belgium. I think there are times he tries too hard to say, nothing's going to get in my way. We don't want to let the terrorists win. I got to do what I got to do. I'd like to see him be a little more urgent because people have legitimate fears and concerns, and I'd like to see him speak to that. On the other hand, I'm not sure how you're outdoing the president if you're saying my wife is hotter than your wife in the context of what's going on in Belgium. So are we embarrassed? Yeah, but we're
par for the course.
What's new about this, right?
Nothing. And you know Twitter battles better than anybody.
I've been in a
You
few.
get in Twitter battles constantly. You're the Twitter battle authority in my
Sadly,
life.
that's
the
true.
Twitter war authority in my life. And you know how I think that's beneath you. And I tell you constantly, you're better than that. Don't get into the Twitter
I'm
stuff.
not, sadly
well,
not.
but now we see presidential candidates are not better than that. And is this going to be the new normal where you're going to have governors all over the place, politicians all over the place engaging in Twitter stuff? The side-by-side wife photo. I never thought we'd see it, but we have.
Within days of, like I said, what is taking place in Belgium.
Real problems.
It's unbelievable. But again, let's also go to the beginning of what Lori said. The super PAC, whoever it was, whether Cruz had anything to do with it or not, that shouldn't have happened either.
Right.
I mean, that was also, we tend to pile up on Trump. He's earned a lot of it. But it starts there. And I mean, that to me, at the start of this process was where this whole thing got going. To expect Donald Trump, though, to rise above it and to say, well, I'm not going to go there, especially with what we have going on in Belgium right now, of course, is expecting way too much of what Donald Trump's capable of when it comes to composure.
Where do you stand in 2016? Spouses, family members, where are they? Can they be brought in at all? It used to be family members and spouses were off limits. Now we know all these people so much better. We learn about them. Is it a different era where they're going to be brought into this thing now?
I'm actually, if they start offering up, savagery of the other candidate that their husband or wife is going up against, then I think it becomes fair game. Beyond that, I'd like to think none of it's fair game. But as we say, we're at a point now where I'm not even sure that I kept hearing some of the experts say, well, now Donald Trump's gone too far.
Now,
what's the distinction? And we've heard that 50 times before. It has had no impact. It appears on his popularity. Maybe it's hurt a little bit, but not enough, I think, for people to go, yeah, he finally crossed the line that you cannot cross. I don't know what that line is. Maybe murder. Maybe if Trump were to murder someone, maybe he'd get nailed with some of his constituents, but I'm not sure all of them would still.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Dan. Let's stay on the Trump beat, though. College students at Emory University in Atlanta up in arms after pro-Trump graffiti, sidewalk chalk, started popping up all across campus. It led to a protest, some students saying they were scared, the school responding, expressing concern. But then you have the other side saying, hey, what about free speech? Dan?
Well, my first inclination on this story was that it's so patronizing to think that because some chumbalone put a bunch of Trump graffiti all over campus, that the students are going to cave in and curl up in the fetal position and be terrified. You say, well, that's awfully patronizing. But in this case, the reality is the university president was reacting to what students were saying, like they were afraid. Buck up a little bit. You're on a college campus. You're going to be fine. It may have been a group. It may have been one idiot. If you want to protest, fine. But the notion that this is going to unravel you to a point where you need a safe space is absurd to me, but these are the messages we're getting on college campuses all the time.
Well, we have the social justice warrior department, right, somewhere out in the Pacific Northwest.
It's usually the Pacific Northwest or California.
Funny, yeah. And then it's going to come here. It's eventually going to trickle here. You know this. I went to at least 5 universities in my time, all in the upper Midwest. So I don't know how it works in Georgia, but I've been to a lot of different schools, and I've obviously traveled to a lot of different. They all had one thing in common: sidewalk chalk. We just called them sidewalks. On college campuses, if there was chalk, that's how you know you're on a college campus, isn't it? Or you have a toddler, that's drawing out in front of your own house. But this is a sidewalk on a college campus, a step on a college campus. There's always been chalk. There's always going to be chalk. I don't know how it went from
sometimes serious stuff, sometimes frivolous stuff.
Sometimes it's where the party is. Sometimes it's where there's a rally. But there's always chalk. It's omnipresent, and apparently now that's graffiti.
The university president, in fact, even basically made it sound as if, if you're for Trump, we got a problem here. So the question to me would be, do Trump supporters on that campus deserve their own safe space? Because allegedly that's what we need in universities, that they shouldn't feel threatened. And you are, whatever you think of Trump, you are allowed, I think, you should be allowed to be able to support him without necessarily getting automatic hostility from the university president. So we've got a trend. There have only been a couple colleges where I think the school president has had the cojones to say, buck up a little bit. We do believe in freedom of speech, and occasionally you might hear something that might make you feel uncomfortable, but if not on a university campus, which should be about challenging all sorts of ideas, where the hell else are you going to be able to do it if not there?
Especially when, does it rain in Atlanta very often? You've made this point before. All it takes is one little rainstorm, and the chalk is gone, and the threat to those college students are gone.
Well, and what we found out since is in the wake of the Trump graffiti, which again might not even been from a Trump supporter. It might have just been some idiot who was doing his own, what do you call that kind of trolling? It's online, it's trolling. I don't know what the term is for that.
You can bring it into trolling. Get people going.
I guess it could.
But when a student's actions rise to the level of assault, intentional assault, we need to deal with that. We need to deal with it quickly so the teacher knows that they are protected when they're trying to teach the rest of their classroom.
If I'm upset about something and you're seeing a 6'4" man coming at you to harm you, yes, you want me out of the classroom, but you're not seeing me as a 14-year-old who's upset about a math problem. You're not seeing me as a 14-year-old who's going through the regular trials and tribulations that 14-year-olds go through.
Welcome back to Enough Said. That's it. You just heard from the author of a new bill aimed at stopping attacks against teachers, and a man who admits he was suspended in high school, but doesn't think the proposed legislation is fair to students. The GOP bill would require school boards to expel any student who assaults a teacher, but it's getting pushback from those who say there's not enough discretion and that it comes down to actual intent. Dan.
Well, it doesn't sound like this bill is going to go pretty much anywhere,
right.
Is what I'm hearing. And we can argue about, I have 2 teachers in my family, and they've been in education a long time, and so I like to think you have to allow some discretion. But I don't think we should take our eye off the ball, and that's why I think it's a subject worthy of the time in the state legislature or any place, because we've talked about it on our show, that when you have situations that are recurring now, it appears, that a lot of folks apparently don't want to talk about, that teachers are in fear at various times, you're done. If a teacher feels as if he or she does not have the opportunity to teach, in part because they may be physically confronted, we're done. So the tolerance level I have for any of that is extremely low. And I know we got a lot of things working at schools right now as it pertains to racial issues in terms of the suspension numbers, etc. But in the end, as I've heard from teachers on and on, that all students suffer, minority students, whatever racial group you're talking about, they all suffer if a teacher is not allowed to keep control because they're keeping kids in the class that they've been told you can't send to the principal's office, or you can't send, you can't possibly suspend. We're doomed if that happens.
It's good that someone's talking about it and at least putting the ball back on that side of the court,
right.
Because forever it's been all about the students,
Absolutely.
Right? You can't suspend them, you can't kick them out of school. The teachers have really just been innocent bystanders in this whole thing. My teachers were used to headaches, right? People that have had us in class. Right. I think teachers accept that, especially the younger the kids are, you're going to deal with headaches and things like that. But head trauma in some of these deals, the story that Channel 9 ran last night that I watched, it's head trauma. Would you ever think of that when you were going to school, that the person that was teaching you, trying to educate you, was going to leave with some kind of head injury or any injury at all because of something that a student did?
And let's be honest, part of the reason some students are emboldened is they feel as if
no punishment.
There's not going to be any punishment because there's so much debate about this. The biggest problem I think we have is we have too many parents now who they basically, when they're talking to teachers, they want to hear what they want to hear about their kid, as opposed to what they sometimes need to hear, which is it ain't working out, or we've got some issues. And a lot of times they're pushing back and putting teachers in a position where they've got absolutely no chance to actually go about the business of teaching.
I assume if you assaulted a teacher, or if I assaulted a teacher,
over.
Expulsion would have been the least of my worries because of what was going to go on back at home.
There
right?
can't be any negotiation on a teacher, and we saw some video of a situation in the hall. I don't care whether the kid should have been in that classroom or not. That line, if that line's crossed, there's no educating going on in the classroom. Zero.
Okay, on that note, enough said. Let's move on. Let's talk about the NFL and concussions. A big New York Times investigation found the league's concussion research years ago was flawed, and that more than 100 diagnosed concussions were omitted from the studies. The NFL, though, is fighting back, saying the missing cases were not an attempt to alter or suppress the rate of concussions. Dan.
Well, the problem the NFL has yet again is their comeback is as flawed as apparently their data. Because what they've said is, hey, we never said that it was a complete list. And yet, if you quote from their own reporting on it, it was all the teams are participating, and presumably that means all the concussions are covered. So a league that already has limited credibility in this situation, Guardsy, to me, loses even more when your comeback is, as I said, as screwed up as the original study. And we can argue about concussions and whether we've got the medical research nailed to the degree that some people think, but clearly there is a connection, and clearly they're hurting their own case when they pretend that they had everything in front, that they were giving everybody the entire report, when in fact, what was it, upwards of 100 players, maybe, including a couple of big-name quarterbacks, were not even included.
Troy Aikman, Steve Young,
Right.
100 was basically 10% of the entire study. I feel like that might skew it, but Number one, are we surprised by any of this?
No.
That the NFL, doing its due diligence, may have lied or may have fudged the numbers just a little bit? But number two, is this going to really matter? I mean, we always talk about the NFL losing credibility in the public, with public opinion.
It won't matter. You're right.
With safety, and where are we right now? March. In 4 or 5 months, no one's going to be talking about this New York Times study. They're going to be talking about training camp, mini camp, preseason. I just want my team to play. The players know that they could have a head injury now. I'm not surprised by any of this, and I really don't think that it's going to have any kind of meaningful impact. How many different concussion stories where we've seen the NFL is screwed up? Not just concussions, on everything.
Right.
And they seem to be right now bulletproof on all of
They're
it.
the one bulletproof sport, and at least for now, because people love it. Now, I think what we will start seeing is on the youth level, fewer kids. There are parents who are going to make some decisions if they have options. But as you know how I feel, as an adult, you now pretty much know a lot about what the dangers are, and I don't think it's my business to tell adults what they want to do, even if you can say, well, they think they know, but they're young now and they're impressionable. And there are many players who've looked back and said they regret playing. Others haven't. I don't think it's our job to decide, but the league doesn't help its own cause, pretending on the one hand to say, no, we finally get it. We're really going to try to go after this. And on the other hand, their report gets revealed as being fraudulent, and they can't even come up with any kind of excuse for explaining why.
With all the knowledge, everybody knows now what goes into football. And you mentioned players say, if I could go back, I wouldn't. There's also a number of players that say, I'd go back in a second. If you told me right now, even though I can't walk right, my head doesn't feel right, I had a lot of fun on Sunday afternoons or Monday nights or whenever it was. You still have a lot of players that say they would have gone back and done it again.
Amazingly enough, for a lot of people, longevity in life is not the most important thing. We all assume that if we feel that way, everybody else does. Some people say, no, I'll take the trade-off.
Our last big topic, UCLA's head basketball coach Steve Alford apologizing for a really bad season by giving back his 1-year contract extension. He called the season unacceptable. Could U of M men's basketball coach Richard Pitino be inspired by this, Dan?
If he has a conscience. Now, how about this? How about instead of saying I'm going to give back, because I think he's due early April, is it 400?
450,
just for being the coach on that date. I think you're right, it's 450. How about he says, I won't give it back, but I'll hold it in escrow, where I won't touch it. It won't really be in my bank account. But if we come back this next season with the allegedly great recruiting class and we make the NCAA tournament, then it'll be mine again. Maybe that's the compromise.
That is a nice compromise. I like that. And there are a lot of coaches around the country that are probably getting asked that very same question, and they're all about
to go. Steve Alford.
Exactly. They're all about to go to the Final Four next weekend in Houston. And Steve Alford is going to be the least popular guy there, because what's more sacred to college basketball coaches than really long-term contracts with meaningless extensions and ridiculous buyout numbers? Alford's buyout number was $10 million, not to be confused with Pitino's, which is $7 million. But they never think about giving it back, because we always say that on the radio, right? True. Fans say that. We shouldn't give him the extension. They should give that back. We shouldn't give him the bonus. Now you have a head coach at a prestigious university, UCLA, saying, I didn't deserve this. I'm giving it back. Now, he does know he's going to have a good year next year. They've got a good recruiting
so then he'll
class.
end up getting 5 extra years.
He's smart
on the back end. It's a smart move, but as you say, he ain't going to be – no one's going to want to have dinner with him in Houston, Texas, because this is pretty precedent-setting, I think, at this level, at least for somebody to do it. And I think part of people's frustration, as you know, is, especially here at the U, where we've got all these subcommittees and search committees, and at the end we still end up negotiating bad deals, is it's the best of both worlds for Pitino right now. There's this huge buyout if they wanted to fire him. It's, as you mentioned, $7 million. But if somehow he gets good and some school comes after him, what do we say the buyout is in a couple of years by another university? Is $500,000.
$500,000 in 2018.
And I think that's why, whether that's not really the coach's fault, that's the negotiator's fault.
Okay, it's time for the lightning round, Justin's first time. Let's start with the comedian best known for The Larry Sanders Show has died. Gary Shandling had a heart attack at just 66 years old. Dan.
Sad story, and for me, a lot of folks in my generation, one of the best TV shows ever on HBO. I like to think of it as a behind-the-scenes reality TV. Before reality TV became bad and calculated, this was reality TV that was creative, that was funny, that was really well crafted, and I don't think there's ever been quite a show like it.
a comedian's comedian, right? If you
Yes.
can get comedians to laugh when they're in their presence, they don't laugh at anything.
No.
And they'll laugh at him all day, oftentimes just at his facial expression.
Okay, next up, southern Minnesota getting hit by a storm. People tweeting all sorts of photos. It was all over your guys' Twitter feeds. Your favorite one, Dan?
Well, I think my favorite. Well, no, actually, I don't have any favorites, Lori, because when we bring all those photos together. What are we doing? We're actually mocking the whole concept of everybody sending these stupid photos. Because I think we survived the siege, Darcy. I don't think any lives were lost. I think we were okay. But once again, in Minnesota, we become soft.
My favorite, Lori, was the pictures that were sent from places. We asked people to send them to their location, from their location. And people would send them from Mexico, Puerto Rico.
Like what?
What's wrong? What's going on? I'm glad we live in the West Metro, though. I always am, but there was no snow there.
Yeah, it was
no
beautiful.
And everyone is in Mexico or Costa Rica right now.
Except for us.
We're here.
You're right.
He's lost that loving feeling. Gophers junior tight end Noah Scarver announces via Facebook that he is retiring from football. He says he's become a much happier person since his decision. Justin.
We see this a lot of times, right, with college kids. You start your career. He's bounced around a little bit. He transferred from out the West, I think, before he came back here. Local kid. If you don't love the game of football, you shouldn't be playing college football with the commitment. So good for him.
And the dangers.
Well,
frankly.
the dangers, number one, but the time commitments, the lack of social life, all of those things. You got to love it if you're going to put in all that time. So congrats to him. Sounds like he's happy.
Move on with the rest of his life.
This has been a topic before on Enough Said. The nets at the Twins or Target Field. The Twins are installing new safety nets. The nets now extend over the first and third base dugouts after safety recommendations from Major League Baseball. Justin.
I love the nets. I know Dan hates the net. They're not there to protect the idiots with the cell phones. You were talking about it with the schools. They're there to protect everybody, not just the people that are on Twitter,
I don't want to be
Facebook,
protected.
Snapchat.
I want to watch the game.
You can still see the name. You can still see the game.
You know what's even safer?
Watching the game?
Just don't go to the game. Then we'll never have any concern at any place in the park that anybody can get hurt. Let's just have games, studio games, where nobody shows up.
So like
Where
the
does it end?
Timberwolves the last couple of years.
That's
what you're alleging.
there. That's unfortunate.
North Carolina man arrested for not returning a VHS tape he checked out 14 years ago. Dan.
Well, the easy joke here is if you're going to keep a movie that long, you'd like to think it was Casablanca or, a really, really good film. But they tell me it was a movie called Freddie Gets Fingered.
Oh, with Tom Green.
Yeah.
A great film.
I heard it was awful.
Oh, a terrific film. You want to keep that.
According to you and maybe two other people.
Well, it's probably more for my generation than your generation. Did he rewind it? That's the big question.
I hope they put him away.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very serious offense.
Do you still have a VCR?
I have not only have a VCR, I have a Beta. That's how far back. And I've got an 8-track